Good evening and welcome to Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an 18-year criminal defense attorney who will be offering the legal analysis on this case, and there are quite a few things wrong with this particular case. Today we'll be talking about Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey, conflict, coercion, and what justice owes a child. Some cases ask whether someone committed a crime. This one asks something much harder. What happens when a system, already compromised, extracts a confession from a child who does not understand the consequences of speaking to law enforcement? Because no matter where you land on Stephen Avery, the case of Brendan Dassey forces us to confront a question the law still struggles to answer. What do we owe the most vulnerable person in the room? Let's talk about who the victim was. Before this becomes a legal controversy, it must remain a human story because a human lost their lives. That human, Teresa Halbach, who was a 25-year-old photographer working for Auto Trader magazine. She was professional, she was independent, she was doing routine work, she was last seen while completing a scheduled assignment. She was not a symbol, she was not a plot device, she was a young woman whose life ended violently. Honoring Teresa means insisting on truthful, credible investigation. No shortcuts that merely feel satisfying. Act 2, a system already on trial. When Teresa Halbach disappeared in 2005, the criminal justice system in Manitowoc County was already under scrutiny. Stephen Avery had recently been exonerated after spending 18 years in prison for a crime of rape that he did not commit. At the time of Teresa's disappearance, Avery was pursuing a civil lawsuit against Manitowoc County, alleging misconduct and seeking significant damages. Because of this conflict, Manitowoc was supposed to step back, meaning not have any point or any job in this investigation. The investigation was assigned primarily to Calumet County. This was meant to preserve the appearance and reality of fairness. Oftentimes in the legal world, when there is an appearance of impropriety, that means that someone is doing something wrong. Even though they might not outwardly be doing something wrong, the fact that Manitowoc had their hands all over this investigation definitely rises to the level of an appearance of impropriety or appearance of wrongdoing. Now, we come to the most troubling part of the story. Brendan Dassey was 16 years old. He was not street savvy. He was not manipulative. He was not capable of strategic thinking. Brendan had a low IQ, impaired comprehension, extreme suggestibility, and difficulty understanding long-term consequences. This is not speculation, it is documented. And constitutional rights mean nothing if the person holding them cannot understand them and articulate what their rights actually are. So what Brendan was accused of. The case against Brendan came almost entirely from his own statements. The state alleged that Brendan participated in the assault. He helped restrain Teresa. He was present during her death. He assisted in the cleanup, and he helped dispose of evidence. There was no independent physical evidence conclusively placing Brendan at the scene as alleged. And given the fact of his low IQ, given the fact that he was open to suggestibility, that clearly raises some questions. And the fact that there was no physical evidence putting him in these positions is another thing that has a problem. His conviction rested on his confession, details extracted during the investigation, and statements later recanted. That distinction matters. Additionally, there is something where there has to be more than a confession. There has to be independent proof that corroborates or backs up what he's saying. Clearly, no independent evidence means that that was not the case. Let's talk about the interrogation. Brendan was interrogated without a parent present. He was 16 years old. Thus, he was a minor. He was a juvenile. He should have had a parent present during the interrogation. What followed was not a spontaneous confession. It was a guided narrative. Investigators often adjusted answers based on who was questioning him. Brendan. It was a guided narrative. Investigators often adjusted answers based on who was questioning him. This is not an accusation against witnesses. It is recognition of how unreliable juvenile statements can be when filtered through adult interpretation. Representation and failure of advocacy. This is where the system failed most clearly, And even those of you who are not attorneys or not 18-year criminal defense attorneys, as I can say, this was a huge failure. Brendan's legal representation did not aggressively suppress the confession early. He failed to intervene during vulnerable stages. Actually, it seemed like he wanted Brendan to confess, maybe to make his job easier. Who knows? He did not ensure Brendan understood the stakes, understood the process, understood the consequences of what he was looking at. He had to have likely known that he had a low IQ. He had to have likely known that he was open to suggestibility. However, he didn't seem to care. He allowed a cognitively impaired minor to proceed as if he were an adult defendant, which clearly should not have happened. This is not an accusation of malice. It is a statement about duty. He had a duty to protect his client, a client who had a low IQ, a client who was open to suggestibility. This is not making fun of Brendan in any way. It's saying Brendan was not protected, and he was not protected. You can say this plainly. Brendan Dassey was not meaningfully protected by the system that was constitutionally obligated to protect him, and that is the plainest statement that I can make. Judges reviewing Brendan's case were sharply divided. Some ruled the confession involuntary, others upheld it. The dissents described coercion, vulnerability, and a child trying to satisfy authority, especially the fact that he understands his limitations, so he's trying to do what he thinks is expected of him, most likely. When courts cannot agree on whether a confession is valid, the issue is not politics, it is legitimacy. And then Stephen Avery revisited. Stephen Avery may or may not be guilty. Reasonable people disagree. But Brendan Dassey's conviction does not depend on Avery's guilt. They are two separate defendants. A system can convict the right person the wrong way and still fail justice. Or let this one breathe, right? Because honestly, I think at some point there has to be a reckoning for Brendan's attorney, and there has to be a reckoning for Brendan to be able to have his true, honest day in court. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great holiday. Bye-bye.